Hi, my name is Mike Annis, and I'm with the Alexander County Veterans Committee. And today I'm being joined here by Travis Kilby, who is a veteran of the United States Army. And Travis, would you like to start this off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm 34 years old. I've been in the National Guard for 17 years now. I've been deployed 3 times. Been to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Baltimore, Maryland to work at the NSA up there some. Um, I've just enjoyed my whole career. Had a lot of fun. Met a lot of nice people.
Oh, that's great. And what community are you from around here?
I actually live in Bethlehem, the
Bethlehem?
Bethlehem community.
Okay. When did you join the National Guard?
November 1996.
November '96.
I was a junior in high school.
So my next question was, what did you do prior to joining the Air Force? I mean, joining the Army, but you apparently just graduated from high school.
Just graduated high school and went straight in.
Yeah. Okay. What was the highest rank you've attained so far? Are you still in?
I'm still in it currently. I'm an E6 staff sergeant as of now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm soon to be promoted to sergeant first class, hopefully sometime this year.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations on that. Where did you do your basic training?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Not a very nice place in the wintertime.
And did you do your AIT there and everything else?
Yes, sir, I sure did.
And then came back to the Guard?
Then came back to the Guard and was here for, I think, about 4 or 5 years before we got deployed the first time.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that's pretty much, you came right back from your AIT. You didn't go to any specialty school or anything like that. That's did you meet any, or did you make any friends that you still keep up with out there in basic training and at AIT school?
A real good friend I made in AIT actually lives in Washington State, and we actually ran into each other in Afghanistan this past trip. He's a airplane electrician, I guess is the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big long drawn out title, but he does all the electrical work on the airplanes.
Could you explain a little bit about what you did in Afghanistan during your deployment, what your MOS is and what you do? And
I'm a 12 Bravo, which is a combat engineer. I did route clearance in Afghanistan. You drive down the road at 2 to 5 miles an hour for 14 hours and look for IEDs on the side of the road. Some days are better than others. Some days you don't find any. Some days you find 20.
mm-hmm.
It just depends. It's pretty nerve-wracking when you're the guy that's in charge of taking care of them when they're found. Went to R2C2 Sapper School, which qualified me to dispose of IEDs up to 50 pounds. So it was definitely hard on the nerves some days, but other days not.
So you didn't have the easy job. Mark it for the engineers. Let them worry about it. You were the engineer.
I was the engineer, and now the way they do things is nobody goes down the route until route clearance goes down the route first. So we actually go before Special Forces, before Navy SEALs, before any of those guys. We worked hand in hand with them a lot of times. Navy SEALs, they call you up and they say, hey, we need to go to this specific spot. You're going to take us there, and that's what we do. We get out and clear routes, whether it's paved routes, dirt routes, goat trails as they call them, no trail, just whatever. That's kind of what we do.
I guess you ended up in a few skirmishes here and there, didn't you?
A few here and there. The wintertime's pretty quiet over there because it's so cold. They don't not really a whole lot of IEDs in the wintertime. I think I found 3 all winter. As soon as it warms up, it's a different story. Of course, they like to blow up bridges so you can't cross them, and then they want to start firefights. I've been in 6 or 8 firefights in Afghanistan. The longest sustained firefight was about an hour. Nothing like, some of the guys from in the beginning where it was, 3 and 4 hours at a time, more like it was in Iraq for us. It was every day from the time the sun come up till it went down, it seemed like.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't so bad.
Did you have any special weapons that you were checked out on? Or?
I did. I actually went to school prior to mobilizing for the designated marksman, which is I carried an M14, the new version of the M14 sniper rifle.
Mm-hmm.
And I used it a few times. You know, it's just how it goes. Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do, but
Yeah.
it's nice to have it when you need it.
Did you check out on any other specialized equipment like EOD disposal or
Well, I went to
those
what
great
they
big
call
vehicles they
oh
got now
yes,
that they clear the mines and
yes.
stuff with?
The actual vehicle that I drove was what they call it a Buffalo.
Hmm.
It's huge. It looks like a school bus with a great big arm on the side of it, and we follow around what they call the Husky, which is the mine detection. It's a single person vehicle. It rides around. It's got ground penetrating radar on the front of it, which can see under the ground, because most of the IEDs are made out of plastic jugs, so they don't have a metallic signature, so you can't find them with a metal detector. So they would find them, then they back off. They mark it with a paint, then they back off, and then I drive my truck up there and use remote control and dig it up. And if I dig it up enough to where I can see what it is, then I can back off and deploy a robot to go out there and pull it out of the ground or place a charge on it and dispose of it.
How far out would be a typical mission for you to leave the base you were at? How far away would you actually have to perform this mission out and back?
Out most of the time they weren't out and backs. It was out to another FOB, as they call it, a forward operating base, and then you spend the night and then you get up and then you come back because you have to go so slow. And it's usually you cover somewhere about 25 miles, and you know you leave it the time when the sun gets up and when you're pulling in the other base, it's dark.
Yeah.
It's an all day. It's 14, 16 hours. All
3
day.
miles an hour. It's
It takes a long time.
8 hours, the best you can do it, right?
It's long, and then of course if you find something that takes more time.
Well, tell us about the outstanding living conditions you had at these fixed operating bases, these forward operating bases.
They were nice. The mattresses usually had holes in them. Springs were sticking out of them. Beds falling down if you even had a bed to sleep on. Tents. The ones we lived in on the base that we were on in Fob Logman were not too bad. They had decent heat, decent air conditioning. There were 12 guys in a tent, which was pretty cramped space. I mean, the guy you're sleeping next to is 3 feet away from you. You hope you don't roll over in the middle of the bed and hit him in the face. But it's in the wintertime, it's very, very, very cold there. When you get up in some of the smaller bases that are not occupied by Americans, because a lot of the places we went were occupied by Romanians or Canadians, and they don't quite live in the same standards that the U.S. military does. And you get in a tent with no heat, and you wake up in the morning and the bottle of water you were drinking for dinner is froze solid. It's pretty cold sometimes. In the summertime, it's right the opposite, of course. You wake up and you're sweating, and there's cats and dogs everywhere because they don't keep them out of their bases like the Americans do.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any specific hairy situations or close calls that you wouldn't mind talking about?
We had a few pretty close calls. We got some intel from the Romanians that there was some insurgents on top of the hill, some Taliban guys putting in some IEDs on one of their observation points, and they wanted us to go up there and clear it, because that's our job. So we loaded up all of our equipment in our backpacks and all this stuff, and we trek up the side of this mountain. It's a 2,000 foot difference in elevation from the highway to the top of this hill. So we get up on the top of this hill, we're up there, and one of the other squad leaders is wearing a backpack that's a jamming device. It jams cell phone signals, any kind of device that would remotely set off an IED. Well, it starts going off, starts giving off the little thing. Well, we haven't found anything, and so we're kind of freaking out a little bit, and get to looking around, and sure enough, there's a couple pieces of black wire sticking up out of a bush. I go over there with a metal detector, get a pretty hard hit with the metal detector, take my hand, I rake it back, and there's a pressure cooker there about the size of a basketball. It'll hold about 20-25 pounds worth of explosives. There was one buried there, and there was 4 there that were placed they were spread out perfectly to where it wouldn't have mattered where you were standing. Had all 4 of them went off, nobody up there would have made it. So it was kind of hairy there for a few minutes, and we get up there and we dispose of those 4. take care of them. You know, we'd climb off the side of the mountain, but we just blew them up on top of the hill. There's no point in removing them. So we go back up there to check to make sure we get it all. I find one more, and it's a pressure plate style. It's kind of the ones, if you step on it, there's, you know, it's going to go off. And luckily it had been in the ground probably a couple of years, because I stepped on it and it didn't go off. That's how I found it. Got lucky. And we happened to find the Taliban guy that was actually continuing to try to set the bomb off. We actually saw him probably 1,000 meters away. I got clearance from my lieutenant, and I engaged from that point and eliminated the target, and we finished clearing the area and moved on.
How did you personally handle being away from your home and family during those deployments?
It's tough. The second deployment wasn't any easier than the first one. I know a lot of guys say, oh, it's easier, it's easier. It's not any easier. You just learn, okay, it's going to come to an end. My first deployment, I didn't think it was ever going to come to an end. And it's tough being away from your kids and your wife, and you know, they're small and they don't understand why dad's away from home, and the only time you really get to talk to them, it's real late at night, so they don't really talk. They just kind of, you know, hey Dad, how you doing? I love you, I miss you, that kind of thing. Of course, it was a lot better in Afghanistan than it was for me in Iraq, because they invented Skype at some point between Iraq and Afghanistan, so you can actually see people and you know, talk on the phone. And when I was in Iraq, we didn't have the ability to use a phone that often. It was more snail mail, as they call it. You know, write handwritten letters back and forth and pictures and that sort of thing. But it was tough. Coming home is probably harder than leaving, because you're coming home to something that's totally different than what you left. It's not the same, and you're not the same. You're not the same person, obviously. You've been through all these different situations and scenarios and stuff, and then you come home and, you know, it's a lot more relaxed and a lot more laid back and not near as structured. Your day is not near as structured as it would have been there. So it's quite an adjustment. You know, I've only been home roughly 6 months now, and it's you know, I'm still adjusting, still making adjustments to being at home.
Yep, I understand. Does your faith play a part in helping you cope with your time over there and here?
It does. I mean, there's, you know, you gotta, I don't know, you know, I gotta look at it one way. You know, a lot of people in the military nowadays, you know, oh, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in this kind of thing. You'll believe in Him when the time comes, and you're still standing there. When
no atheists in a foxhole, are there?
Not at all. You know, when you're laying behind a dirt berm that barely covers your head, and there's 25 guys on top of a hill shooting at you, and you come out unscathed with nothing more than a scratch on your face from where you ran into the bushes trying to get into the hole. There's somebody looking out for you.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. Well, what did you do for fun when you?
We played soccer quite a bit with the Afghan Army guys before. There was a big issue while I was there with what they call blue on green, where the Afghan Army guys were actually Taliban that would turn on the Americans on the base. And up until that point, we actually interacted with them quite a bit. I was training them on how to do route clearance and training them on how to handle explosives and that sort of thing. And we used to play soccer with them, and, you know, stuff very small, but still went a long ways. We done that, and then a lot of times with my guys in my squad, you know, we would go and play video games together or go to the gym and work out together. Just that's fun. There wasn't really a whole lot to do where I was at, because the FOB's only roughly 1.5 mile radius. It's real small, you know, so there wasn't a whole lot to do. I hung out a lot with the Navy EOD guys more than anything.
Did you receive any major awards or medals or commendations? I'm sure you did.
I got a Bronze Star this time for, it's a big, long, drawn-out thing. I didn't bring the paperwork with me, but basically it was for the things that I did during combat situations. Taking charge, leading 38 guys out of a disaster area without losing anybody, kind of thing. So I felt pretty good about that.
Well, that's good. That's great. Did you have any? I'm sure you got plenty of photos and stuff like
I
that. You know.
do. I have, but they're all on my computer. I didn't print any of them off or anything like that.
Well, maybe we can do an addendum to this sometime
I'll
and
get
get some
some
of
of them
that put
printed
in
off
there.
and that kind of thing.
What are you doing now that you've left? That you're back from your
I went back to
deployment,
my
your civilian job.
civilian job. You know, I travel a lot with my job. I clean underground storage tanks, gas tanks, diesels, airplanes. You know, whatever has fuel in it that's a tank that needs to be cleaned. That's what I do, and you know, it's okay. But if I could stay at home every day, I would. I miss being with my kids so much.
I understand. I understand. Were or are any of your family members or ancestors in service now or
Not
before?
Not now. There was a long time ago before, you know, before any of the people I ever met in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the first one in, I want to say, 50 plus years to join the military on either side of my family.
Really, really. So you don't have any brothers or sisters or anybody that's
I'm an
serving?
only child. I take it back. I had a cousin that was in the Marine Corps. He was in the Marine Corps for 6 years and got out.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
The youngest one is 5, and the oldest one is 12. They're 5, 7, 9, and 12.
Well, that's great. That's great. I know you're in the VFW, the local VFW post. Are you active in any of the other veterans organizations?
I do a thing. I like to ride Harleys. I got a Harley. I like to ride motorcycles. I do a thing with the Harley Davidson shop out of Hickory, Blue Ridge over there, and they have a veterans group that rides together. And I've just recently kind of started getting my foot in the door with that. But other than that, I haven't really had a chance to get into a whole lot of anything else.
Well, the American Legion post here, I'm a member of the American Legion post. They're forming a Legion Riders club in it right now. So
I'm definitely interested.
I'm
in
sure
that.
they would love to for you to come by one of their meetings and talk to them about that. I'm sure they would love to, and I'm sure you'd love to do it. I'm not a motorcycle enthusiast myself. I know my limitations, so I try to stay off of them. Well, Travis, what would you say? And you'll have the chance to do this to a guy that was your age when you first joined the Army. What would you have to say to them if somebody was to tell you they were interested in joining the armed forces today?
Think about it and realize that if you join in this time and day, you're going to war. I get a lot of new troops now that join straight out of high school. They go to basic training, AIT, they come back, they start to get deployed, and they're like, well, I didn't want to get deployed. I wanted to do this or I wanted to do that. And I'm like, we've been at war for 11 years. How did you expect not to go to war? But if I had to give them one good piece of advice, it would be pick a job in the Army that you're going to like, because you're going to do it when you get deployed. You're going to sit down and you're going to do this job day in and day out. And it needs to be something that you like, because every job in the military, if you don't do it properly, can cost lives. Because, it's like airplane mechanics. He doesn't feel like tightening the bolt all the way one day. Well, then that airplane goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Even cooks, if they don't want to cook the food properly, then, But it's basically pick a job if you're interested in the military, and that's the route to go. Stick with that job. If you plan on going to college and joining the military, you need to pick a officer's course that is suitable to your personality. Not everybody's cut out to be a combat engineer. Not everybody's cut out to be an infantryman. There's so many different things out there. Combat arms is one of the bigger things in our state. We have a lot of combat arms in our state, a lot of combat units in this state. But there are other things out there. If you like the local unit here in Taylorsville, which is where I started as a construction engineer. There's a lot of stuff in construction, and that's stuff that can roll over once you're out of the military into your civilian life, because a lot of the stuff transfers. Just like all the courses that I've taken through the years in the military, certain colleges take those courses as credited courses toward a degree. So a lot of the stuff that I took as a construction engineer goes toward an associate's degree for me in construction management, which means I only have to go to school for 3 months
Mm-hmm.
or one semester, and I've got a 2 years associate's degree. A lot of people don't in the military don't understand that colleges do that, and the military is a good thing for kids that don't know what they want to do straight out of high school. It gives you a sense of direction. You know, maybe you don't know what you want to do. Maybe you're like I was. I was in high school, and I was a junior in high school, and the recruiter come around, and he's like, well, the Army's this, the Army's that. And I was like, well, that sounds pretty interesting. That sounds like fun. You know, I didn't know anybody that had ever been in the service before. And I thought about it. I went home and done a little more research on it. And I was like, you know, I don't really know what I'm going to do when I get out of high school. And I chose the National Guard because the National Guard gives you the option for both ways. You get a little taste of what active duty's like every day when you go to basic training and AIT, and you do deployments or active duty status where you get put on active duty for 2 or 3 weeks a year or whatever. And yet you still get to live your civilian life and see your family every day, your friends that you went to school with and that kind of thing. And once I joined, it was like most of my friends that I had in high school was like, well, hey, that seems like a good idea. Next thing I know, I got 4 or 5 of my friends that are in the Guard with me, and you meet a lot of people in the Army that you otherwise wouldn't meet, and even in being in the National Guard, I've met a lot of people with a lot of insight on life itself. It's not that you're not going to grow up, but a lot of times at 18, you have no idea what's in store for you for the next 10 years. And the Army gives a lot of people that grew up like I did. I grew up in a split home. You know, my dad wasn't around a whole lot from the time I was, 15 till I was 18. So, I really was just kind of lost in space when it come time to graduate school. I graduated high school. I obviously had joined the National Guard, and that kind of put me in a better place in my personal life. I grew up and got to find out what kind of person I am.
Mm-hmm.
The Army and the military in general will teach you what kind of person you are. I mean, it'll pull out the worst in you. It'll bring out the best in you. And if you make it, then you're one of the 1% of the people in the United States that can say, "Hey, I've been in the military." Because there's only 1% of us, and there's not. I think that a lot of people don't recognize that, and the kids these days, like I said, I get a lot of new faces. I get 3 new ones Saturday, and you get a lot of these kids, and it's a lot with the fact that the way society has changed over the years, and they have no direction in their lives at all. And then they get in the military. You see them before they leave and go to basic training. Then you see them when they get back. And they're 2 totally different people. In that 8 weeks time period, it changes them that much.
Mm-hmm.
And biggest advice I could give anybody that's looking as a young adult to get into the military is think about what you're doing. Think about you're stepping into even if you're not Special Forces or Navy SEALs or anything like that, 1% of Americans join the military. You're still part of an elite force by joining the military. It's not for everybody, and it's strictly volunteer. You're volunteering for something that a lot of people can't do. So, it's just something I would tell.
I agree with you. I'm one of those people that believes everybody in America ought to have 8 weeks of basic training.
It would do them a lot of good. It really would. I'm a firm believer.
We could certainly learn to get along a lot better together if we all had 8 weeks of basic training. Well, Travis, I really appreciate you sitting down and spending this time with us and talking about your experiences and getting this on tape and saving it for posterity and on behalf of the other veterans in Alexander County, I'd like to thank you for your service, and
yes,
I really appreciate you coming by and talking to us tonight.
Yes, sir. I just want to get it out there and help as many people as we can, because there's a lot of veterans like me that are coming back, and my stepdad is he's a Vietnam vet, and he talks about how it was when they came back, and it's rolling back into that kind of when we're getting back now. There's no welcome home parties at the airports. There's no you walk through the airport in their uniform, and people just kind of look at you funny. There's no appreciation for what is being done. Even though whether people agree with what's going on over there or not, it's still going on. People are still losing their lives every day.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate the 1% of the people that volunteer to go do that.
Exactly.
And that's one of my biggest things.
Well, I agree. Well, thank you, Travis.
You're very welcome.
Well, Travis, I appreciate you bringing some of your memorabilia for us to look at today. The ISF medal. Explain to us what that really means. What that means.
The ISF medal is for all the coalition forces that are deployed in Afghanistan. Iraq's it's a NATO medal because it falls under a different category, but in Afghanistan you get an ISAF medal for working with the Romanians, the Lithuanians. We worked with Canadians before the Canadians were pulling out about the time that we got there, but working with all the different security forces, the Afghan security forces and that kind of thing. This is a medal that you get for working with them, teaching them how to do stuff, working side by side with them, and just it's pretty much just a medal for being able to coexist with other countries doing the same job.
Right. It's a service medal.
It's a service medal.
Right. And ISAF stands for
International Security Afghan Forces.
Okay. Well, that's great. Your Bronze Star medal there. That's pretty high up on the hit parade for the military. Would you care to elaborate on how you ended up with that?
The Bronze Star for me was given to me. I obviously, if I had the paper, we'd sit here and read it. It'd take about a half an hour to read where the award was written up. But it was given to me for actions during combat, for leading my team through combat situations, firefights, IED attacks, that kind of thing. Just excellent leadership was one of the things that was put on there. It's the third highest medal you can get in the Army. There's obviously the Silver Star and then the Medal of Honor. Bronze Star's a pretty big deal for me as an E6, because most of the time an E6 doesn't get the opportunity to do things to get a Bronze Star. But as situations dictated, for us, I was the highest ranking person there at times, and that's, I was the decision maker. I didn't, I had 20, 25 people that I was making life and death decisions for, and they felt that it was warranted me getting a Bronze Star for that, and for other combat related actions as far as direct contact with the enemy and that sort of thing.
I see that you had your Sapper's Creed etched in.
Actually, our first sergeant, he had this done for us. It's the Sapper's Creed. It's combat engineers. If you go to sapper school or you become a sapper, which I'm in a sapper unit in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, I am not sapper tabbed. I did go to an R2C2 sapper course, which gives you an identifier, but it does not give you the tab like a Ranger tab or a Special Forces tab would.
Mm-hmm.
But it is it's a big deal in the combat engineer world, kind of like being a Ranger would be in the infantry world. And the sapper's a big deal for the combat engineers. We're usually the first ones out there. We're the elite among the elite in the 12 Bravo series, or the combat engineer series. It's a pretty big deal, and the first sergeant had these made for us. He gave them out to all the guys, and the ones of us that went to the class and that sort of thing. And we it meant a lot to me. I hung on to it, and it hangs on the wall of my house, and it's something that I live by. Can they see that? Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if you wanted me to.
I know in the military there is steeped in tradition and symbolism. The Spartan helmet.
Spartan helmet is that's our unit. The 883rd
Mm-hmm.
is the Spartans, and that was our unit, and we chose that particular helmet because I know a lot of people seen the movie 300, and it sounds kind of cheesy to say that, but if you think about Spartans, if you know much about history, there were few, and they fought many, and that's kind of how the sappers are. There's
Right.
few of us, but we fight many during battle. So that's kind of how we looked at that and kind of went off of that kind of thing.
Outstanding. I see you also brought your NCO's Creed. As you and I were talking about earlier today, the NCO's Creed is actually an excellent lesson to live by if you can live by that creed.
Yes, sir. It is. It is. You know, the NCO, for people that may not know, that is a non-commissioned officer, which we are enlisted. We sign a contract as to be an enlisted person, whereas an officer, their contract is more. They are a commissioned officer. It's a different kind of officer. They are the ones that are the captains and the lieutenants that make the big boy decisions, as we call them. The NCOs, we're kind of the guys that are. We take what they say and break it down into elementary terms and make it work. And that's kind of what we do. It's something to live by. It's a big accomplishment in the military to become an NCO. You as an enlisted person, your ranks go from E1 to E9, and to become an NCO, you have to be an E5. And it's a pretty big accomplishment. It's not something that's handed out. It's something you have to earn, and a lot of people never earn it in their career. And I've been fortunate. I've been an NCO for a better part of probably 12 years, and I really enjoyed it. And like you said, this is something to live by. If you apply this even outside of the military, if you apply this to your everyday life, you won't find a challenge that you can't overcome.
Yep, that's the one thing about the creed, and that's through all the services is doing what's right even though nobody's looking. And
That's
and if
it.
you can do that, you will be successful your whole life.
It's what separates. It's what separates people. It's the difference between right and wrong, and that's what separates a lot of people. If you can do the right thing when nobody's looking or behind closed doors where nobody can see, then you're always going to do the right thing, and that's part of being an NCO, is making the right decision. As I said earlier, on the Bronze Star, there was times that as an E6, a staff sergeant, I was the highest ranking person standing on the ground, and as being that, living by the NCO creed, the decisions I made, I had to stick by the decisions that I made, because they're life and death sometimes. When you're in the middle of a firefight and you got 10 guys shooting at 5 of you, and you're making the decisions and you're making the calls, you have to be able to do that, think on your feet, and that's part of being an NCO, is make that decision and stick to it. And you have to be able to make the right decision no matter what the situation is. And that's just something that I've always prided myself in, was being able to make the right decision. And so far, knock on wood, so good, I've made all the right decisions.
Well, Travis, I appreciate you bringing this stuff and showing it to us today.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.